I look exactly like I did in the last video. That's because I'm filming it immediately after. Because if I don't do that, it's never going to get filmed. Because momming is quite interesting with this little guy right now. So he's on my lap. That's why I'm pointing like this. So in this video, we're going to talk about how 10 days after I had Owen and my labor, and well, I didn't labor, I had a C-section. 10 days after I had Owen and my C-section went great, everything went fine, no excessive bleeding, no health issues for me, for Owen, for anybody. But 10 days later, I almost died. What happened was Scott took the week Owen was born off of work. So he was home with me, able to help me out, which was awesome. And then the next week he had to go back to work. So that was the day that we're going to be talking about was Thursday. So he went back to work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, everything went fine. Obviously I was still in some pain from the C-section, getting used to this little guy, waking up with him at night, feeding him, pumping, all of that fun stuff. So everything was going perfectly fine, normal. I was bleeding, of course. I had just had a baby, but normal amounts, no issues. So that Thursday morning, it was 5-something in the morning. Owen had woken up hungry, ready to eat. So I sat up with him, started feeding him. And at this point we were supplementing with formula because my milk wasn't enough for him yet. I wasn't pumping enough. And he never did take to latching very well. So I sat up, I made him a formula bottle, got him situated. I had him kind of on my lap, I was holding him, and started to feed him. So after you have a C-section, you have a lot of restrictions. You can't lift things, you're not supposed to move around a whole lot, and I hadn't been. They had told me I could lift Owen, but don't lift anything other than the baby. Okay, no problem. I wasn't carrying his diaper bag, I wasn't bending, I wasn't lifting, I wasn't doing much of anything really. Scott wanted me to just leave things, dirty bottles, leave them in the sink. When he gets home, he'll wash them. Wasn't doing laundry, cleaning, none of that. So about 5-something in the morning, Owen woke up hungry, got him situated, started feeding him, and I started cramping pretty bad. So I noticed it was worse cramping than I had been having. I hadn't been having a whole lot of cramping, but a little bit. So it was pretty uncomfortable, it was painful. I remember thinking, ow, like what the heck, this hurts. So keep feeding him. And he was only taking about 2.5 ounces at that point. So the cramping kept going, getting pretty painful. And I could feel that I was bleeding pretty heavily. So I thought that was a little bit weird. But I finished feeding him, I burped him. I laid him over on the bed. We have a king size bed. He was perfectly fine, can't roll. So I laid him down and went to go to the bathroom because I'd been bleeding pretty heavy. So I didn't take my, I kind of took my time. I was recovering from a pretty serious surgery, but I laid him over on the bed and I started to scoot off the bed and I started shivering really bad, like I was freezing, which wasn't abnormal at this point. I was getting night sweats. So I had been sweating while I was sleeping. So I started shivering, I was freezing all of a sudden, so I was like, oh, that sucks. So I reached over and I grabbed this big fluffy robe that I have. So I put the robe on, and just the process of putting the robe on, my whole body started shaking. So that's weird. So I walk from the bed to our bathroom, which is really, if you've been in our house, you know how close our bedroom is to the bathroom, super, super close. So by the time I got to the bathroom, my whole body was convulsively I don't know if that's a real word, but shaking. My whole body, I could not control it. I sat down on the toilet and I could not stop shaking. I could not control it. I couldn't control my body. My jaw was shaking really bad. I've never been so cold that I've shivered that hard. Like, it wasn't shivers, this was shaking, like severe shaking. I was involuntarily making noises. Bella was freaking out. She had followed me to the bathroom and she was just freaking out of nowhere. I knew something was wrong. At this point, I was losing a lot of blood. So I called Scott. He didn't answer right away. He was at work. So I called him again. He didn't answer. So I texted him emergency. So he called me right back, and just trying to speak to him, to tell him something's wrong, I need you to come home right now, was ridiculously difficult. I couldn't stop shaking. I was struggling so hard to just breathe, keep my breath, and try and tell him. So he asked what was wrong. I said, I'm bleeding a lot. I think I told him, I think I'm hemorrhaging. So he said, do you need me to come home? I said, yes. So he got home. He doesn't work very far from here, but this whole time that he was leaving work to get home, I was still in the toilet because I couldn't stop bleeding and I couldn't stop shaking. There was no way I was going to be able to get up, go into the bedroom. By now, Owen had started crying, but I was shaking so hard, there's no way I could get in the bedroom, and there was no way I was going to try and pick him up shaking as bad as I was, because I would have dropped him. So he was in the bedroom, he was safe, he was on the bed, he was fussing. Scott came in the door and came straight to the bathroom. And he's like, what's going on? What's going on? I said, I think you need to call 911. So he did. He immediately grabbed his phone, called 911, told them, my wife just had a baby. She's hemorrhaging. We need an ambulance. So he stayed by me. At this point, I'm like, go check on the baby. Go check on the baby, because he was crying. He's like, he's fine. He's fine. Just relax, calm down, try to breathe. I couldn't. I mean, I could breathe, but I couldn't calm down, relax. I couldn't stop shaking. It was horrible. By now, the cramping had gotten really bad, so I was like moaning in pain, and I'm not a person that does that. I'll say ow, like if I stub my toe or something, there's usually a few extra words in there. But I'll say ow, I'm not one to like scream or yell or moan and groan. I've had IBS for years. I've had stuff like that. And even then, I'll complain about it, but I don't make pain noises, but I was making a lot of pain noises. So the ambulance gets here. At some point in there, my dad and my stepmom got here too. My stepmom had called after I got off the phone with Scott. My dad must have called my stepmom. My dad and Scott work together. Because my stepmom called and she said, what's going on? And I could barely talk to her. I told her, I'm bleeding a lot. I can't stop shaking. She said, are you going to go to the hospital? I said, yeah, I think I need to go to the hospital. She said, okay, do you need me to come sit with the baby? And I said, yes, please. So the ambulance got here. I could hear my dad and my stepmom, but I couldn't see him. I was still in the bathroom. I remember the EMTs coming in, asking me what's going on. I'm shaking horribly, having trouble talking. So I answered the questions that I could, and Scott answered some. They basically just asked my age, my name, they were making sure I was still with it because I was losing a lot of blood. They asked if I could get up and walk to the living room to get to the stretcher, and I said no. I was in way too much pain. I was shaking too much. I said there's no way I can do it. So they managed to get the stretcher down the hallway. I did have to walk from the bathroom to the stretcher, which wasn't very far, but it felt like 3 miles because I was in so much pain. They got me up onto the stretcher. I'm bleeding this whole time. It's not stopping. It doesn't stop. So they get me out of the stretcher. That's when I remember kind of glancing into our bedroom, and I could see my dad and my stepmom sitting on our bed. And I don't remember who, but one of them was holding Owen. So the EMTs get me on the stretcher. They get me out of the house. It's still dark out at this point, but they get me out the front door. And the only way they could get me to the ambulance was partially through our grass. And I was in so much pain. Ultimately, we figured out that my uterus was contracting because there was some issues that we'll get into in a second, but my uterus was contracting. It was a ridiculous amount of pain. So they get me out the door, they get me through the grass. I'm making lots of noise. I wasn't screaming, but I was hollering a little bit and it hurt. So they get me out, get me into the ambulance, and then they're gonna start an IV on me. So they decide to have the new guy start the IV. I am normally the person that if a doctor comes in and says, hey, I've got a student, or a nurse says, hey, I've got a student, do you mind? I don't mind at all. Go ahead, come in. Learn what you're gonna learn. No problem, I don't mind. But when I'm losing that amount of blood and I'm in that much pain, please don't have the new guy start the IV. Somebody get the freaking IV in me so we can get to the hospital. So the guy tried, he poked me 2 or 3 times. I don't know how many, but I know it was more than once. And eventually another of the EMTs said, okay, let me try, because he wasn't getting a vein. And he couldn't get it either. So they said, forget it, we're just gonna get her to the hospital. So a little bit of backstory on the hospital. Owen was born at Rush Copley Hospital in Aurora. So I can literally see Mercy Hospital from my house, but I'm not a big fan. So all of our doctors are through Rush Copley. Owen was born at Rush Copley, and that's completely on the other side of town. So when you have an emergency and you're bleeding out, they're not going to take you across town. They're going to take you to the nearest hospital. So they were taking me to Mercy right here. So they said, forget the IV. We're just going to get her to the hospital. It's right here anyway. So that was fine. So they rushed me over here. Scott followed the ambulance to the emergency room. And my dad and my stepmom stayed here with Owen. Thank God. Thank you guys. If you're watching this, you guys are awesome. And Owen loved spending all that extra time with Grandma. So Scott got up to the hospital, and I remember everything from getting there because I never did lose consciousness, and they weren't able to give me pain medication for so long. So we get to the hospital, they get me in. Nurses immediately come in because I arrived by ambulance. The nurses immediately come in, they get the IV started. They start checking me, they're asking my pain. I'm telling them, please give me something. I am in so much pain. I'm still moaning and groaning, still losing lots of blood. So they gave me something, and I'm not sure what they gave me for pain. I know I probably morphine or something along those lines, because I remember kind of feeling the burning feeling I normally feel with that, but it didn't touch it. Didn't touch the pain. I'm still bleeding like crazy. I waited, to me, what felt like 3 hours, but was probably less than 30 minutes, and told them I need something more. I'm in so much pain and it's not going away. They had been talking to the doctor, but I hadn't seen the doctor quite yet. So they checked my blood pressure, and at that point it was, I couldn't tell you for sure, but it was 70 or 80 something over 58 was my blood pressure. They couldn't give me anything else for pain. My blood pressure was way too low. I had lost too much blood. So the doctor comes in, super nice guy, loved this doctor. Comes in, asks questions. I answered what I could. Scott answered the rest for me. And he ordered an ultrasound because he wanted to see what's going on. I'm bleeding like crazy and contracting really bad. So he wanted to see what was going on. So they sent me down for ultrasound. Can't give me anything for pain. I'm hollering, moaning and groaning. They get me down and start the ultrasound, and I can tell that they see something, because you can always tell if you're having an ultrasound done. I've had them done for a baby, obviously, but for other reasons. I get cysts on my ovaries, stuff like that. So I can tell that they see something. The doctor comes in, he's like, what do we have? The nurse is pointing something out on the screen. I wasn't asking questions. Normally I'd be like, what is it? What's wrong? I wasn't asking questions. You guys figure it out, fix me, and we can talk about it later. But the doctor was super transparent. He's like, okay, we see a large blood clot on the ultrasound in your uterus. We're gonna have to go in and do surgery to get rid of that. I don't care. Do what you have to do, but make it go away. So they get me back to my room in the emergency room. The doctor comes in. They're trying to get the bleeding to stop or slow down. They did eventually get my robe off of me, and I swear to you, that robe was garbage from then on out. It's ruined. There's nothing we're ever going to be able to do. I bled way too much. They get me switched over. The doctor comes back in, and he explains that these are the steps they're going to take. They're going to take me in for this first surgery. It was a DNC. He might have explained it. I'm not sure. I don't remember him talking about exactly what these things were called, but he said, we're going to take you in for this first surgery, talking to Scott at the same time. We're going to do the DNC and see if that fixes the problem. If that doesn't fix the problem, we're going to go to option B, which is going to be, following the DNC, an angiogram, where I found out that they ended up going into like my inner thigh, kind of my groin area. They went in and they actually put he described it as like foam. I keep picturing it as like great stuff, the foam that expands, to block off the artery so that it would stop bleeding. So if the DNC didn't work, they're going to do the angiogram to try and block off the artery so that it'll stop pouring out blood. If neither of those worked, then chances are I was going to have a hysterectomy. So That's terrifying. I did just have my baby, so thankfully he was here and everything was good. But we've always planned on having 2 kids, and that's terrifying. I'm 34 years old. I didn't want to have a hysterectomy. So either way, that let's get things going. Let's figure it out because I was losing a ton of blood. So they move me. I say goodbye to Scott. They move me to like a waiting area for the DNC for this. He was just calling it a surgery. I still at this point didn't know it was a DNC. I just knew it was an emergency surgery they were doing to stop the blood. So he moved me over there. Still couldn't give me anything for pain. I never was screaming or yelling. I was just moaning and groaning in pain. So they had me in that room. This doctor comes in. He just hears me moaning and groaning, comes in. It's okay. I know you're in so much pain. I promise we're moving as fast as we can so that we can get you under anesthesia so you're not in so much pain. I know it hurts. It's going to be okay. And I don't remember if I asked him in that room or if I asked him in the emergency room. I said, you're not going to let me go home tonight to my baby, are you? And he said, no, you're not going to be able to go home tonight. And that's when I lost it. Not when they talked about a hysterectomy, not when I was in pain. I wasn't crying from the pain. I was just moaning and groaning from the pain. But when they said that, no, you're not going to be able to go home tonight to your newborn baby, that's when I lost it. So they said they were just waiting on the anesthesiologist. She came up, she got me. She ended up being the one that was pushing me into the operating room. And I could already tell at this point, like, this doctor was super nice, super sweet. I would be seen by that doctor again a million times. He was amazing. The nurses that I dealt with were amazing. The anesthesiologist was very nice, but maybe don't let her drive the patient beds because we're going into the operating room. She's pushing me. She rams me into a wall. I scream because it hurt. The doctor and the nurses start yelling at the anesthesiologist, like, what the hell is wrong with you? So she gets me in the room. They move me from the emergency room bed onto the operating table. And at this point, the doctor thinks I'm out of it. He doesn't think that I'm that I know what's going on, but I know everything that's going on. So he moved me over, and I just remember the operating table feeling so small and narrow. And just like, I wasn't going to be moving a whole lot anyway because I was in so much pain, but I was afraid I was going to fall off the operating table. So doctor tells me, okay, we're going to start here in a second. We're going to get you under anesthesia. You're going to be completely knocked out. And then we're going to start the process. And then he reiterated, we're going to do this first. If this doesn't work, we're going to move over into the angiogram. If the angiogram doesn't work, then we're going to wait. We're going to get your bleeding to stop no, I don't think there was any wait. It gets a little foggy there, but I think it was, we're going to do the angiogram. And if that doesn't work, they were basically at that point going to do whatever it took to get the bleeding to stop so I didn't die. Because I was bleeding out at this point. The bleeding hadn't slowed down, hadn't stopped. I'm still bleeding on going into the operating room. So ultimately, if the DNC and the angiogram didn't work, he was going to take me into surgery and do a hysterectomy. I was going to lose my uterus. So I remember I just told him, I understand. I get it. Basically save my life so I can go home to my baby. If that's what it takes, that's what it takes. So I remember the anesthesiologist putting the big poofy oxygen mask over my nose. And immediately, as soon as she did, I started going, it knocked me out. I was in so much pain. It was ridiculous. I want to go to sleep. I don't want to hurt anymore. Knock me out. So I was breathing in real deep, and she goes, this is just oxygen. Okay. Like the second you turn that gas on, I'm knocking out. I don't care. So I don't remember much from there. They knocked me out. Scott says I did go to recovery from there, but the bleeding didn't stop. The doctor was able to get the blood clots out. There was a couple of them, but there was a large one. He was able to get those out, but the bleeding didn't stop. My uterus just kept filling up with blood. I just kept bleeding and bleeding and bleeding. So we knew immediately that I was going to have to go in for the angiogram. So I don't remember any of it, but Scott says that I did go into a recovery room. I woke up, talked to him. I don't remember any of it. The next thing I remember was waking up as they were wheeling me into the next surgery room where they were doing the angiogram. Because I remember waking up, different nurses around me, didn't recognize them, didn't really care. I was still in pain. They couldn't give me anything for pain still because I'm still bleeding. Um, so I remember the male nurse looking at him, and I must have looked confused or something. He said, "Everything's okay. We're wheeling you in for the angiogram." So he said, "Okay, you're going to knock me back out, right?" He said, "Yeah, we're knocking you right back out." That's all I remember from there. I remember them kind of lining the bed up and everything, and they were asking how I was doing, and I was just saying, "I'm in a lot of pain. I'm in a lot of pain." And the female nurse said, "It's okay. We're going to put you back under." So they put me back under. The next thing I remember, I woke up in the ICU. So the angiogram did work. I didn't have to have a hysterectomy. I didn't lose my uterus. Everything's still there. But because I had lost so much blood during the D&C, they had done a blood transfusion. So I had to be given 2 units of blood because I had lost a lot. So I was in the ICU. So I ended up staying in the ICU overnight. Scott stayed with me at the hospital for a while. All of this started at 5 something in the morning. We'll say 5:15, 5:20 in the morning. And Scott stayed with me at the hospital until about 5:30, 6 o'clock at night when he finally was able to come home to relieve my dad and my stepmom so that he could take over taking care of Owen for the night. So Scott stayed in the room with me. The doctor came in and explained that the D&C hadn't worked. They were able to get rid of the blood clots that I had, but the bleeding, he couldn't stop the bleeding with the D&C, so they ended up sending me over for the angiogram, and that seemed to work, so they didn't have to do the hysterectomy. So I was very happy to hear that. Scott, of course, was just, "I'm right here, everything's okay," just checking on me, that kind of stuff, and I was still really woozy and out of it from all the anesthesia. So I was really sleepy. Once Scott knew that I was okay and I was a little more with it, I asked for my phone once I was a little more awake because I knew he had started letting people know what was going on. He had to let my mom know, my sister, my brothers, my stepdad, and Scott's mom and grandma and everybody, let them know what was going on because I was bleeding out. We didn't know. I don't remember ever being afraid, "Oh my God, am I going to die?" I don't remember that at all. I was just more concerned with in the moment. I was in a lot of pain, so I don't remember being afraid of that. But it was very serious, and it was very possible that I could. So he had been letting people know what was going on. So once I was alert enough and more with it, I took my phone and I was able to start. I didn't want to talk to anybody. My throat hurt really bad because I had been intubated during the surgeries. So I started texting people to just let them know I'm okay, I'm awake, to try and calm people down because I freaked people out. I freaked a lot of people out. Scott was traumatized. Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. So I spent that night in the ICU. Scott ended up leaving to come home. I was perfectly fine with that. I wanted him to be home with the baby. Our niece Jade brought me up some stuff later on. She brought me up a change of clothes because at this point we knew I wasn't going home that night. I was spending the night in the ICU, but there was a chance I'd be able to go home the next day, that Friday. So Jade brought me a change of clothes. She brought me a charger, my iPad, a couple of random things from home. And that was it for the night. They let Jade come in. It was after visiting hours, but they let her come in because she was bringing me some stuff. So I let her know that I was okay. I thanked her for bringing my stuff up there. And then I just kind of hung out for the night. Nurses in the ICU were awesome. The nurse I had at first, his name was Mike. He was super cool. We figured out he's been there for quite a while, but I had him that day and then the next day. But everything was good that night. I just had some trouble sleeping. The next day, I had some sort of balloon catheter in that was stopping the bleeding. So that was, I don't remember what it was called, but that was another thing that they were using to stop the bleeding. So the test was going to be the next day, that Friday. If he could pull that catheter out and I didn't start bleeding heavily again after a couple hours, then I could go home. So the next day, the doctor did come in. He checked on me, still super sweet. Really liked that doctor. Got rid of that catheter. I did start bleeding again a tiny bit, but it was a tiny bit, so he was perfectly fine with that. I had a regular catheter in, so they got rid of that. And ultimately that night, that Friday night, I was released to come home. So it was terrifying. I don't ever want to experience anything like that again. But it was pretty quick, and I was home the next night with little man and with Scott. So I'm fine now. Update from there. My doctor did get with the emergency room doctor at the other hospital because they want to try and figure out why. Why did I have the hemorrhage? Why was I bleeding out? Long story short, they don't know. They don't know why I hemorrhaged. They don't know what caused it. They don't have a way to prevent it from happening again. So what we just found out at my appointment last week was there's definitely a chance that if we have another baby that I would hemorrhage again. We don't know that for sure. But because we don't know what caused it, we don't know how to prevent it from happening again. So that's kind of where we're at right now. I'm healthy, everything's fine. I've been cleared by my doctor. I can drive, I can lift, I can move, walk, exercise. I can do everything that I want now. So it was terrifying, but I'm doing good now. So that's good. But that's it. That's how I almost died 10 days after I had my little miracle baby. I'll cut it there. The video is already super long and I'm not even going to be cutting a whole lot out. So thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, subscribe, like, leave a comment, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. It won't be as traumatic as this one. Bye guys.